Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving holiday. If you are celebrating that, if you're like Kyrie Irving, you detest Thanksgiving and you weren't celebrating. And if you're, listening abroad, you aren't listening. You don't even probably know what Thanksgiving is. But to all who celebrated, I hope you had a really good time filled with good food, family, all that sort of stuff. But there was basketball going on in the meantime. It sleeps for no man, Sap. And, we look up at the standings today after Thanksgiving, and it's the same as the standings were before, with my beloved Boston Celtics on top of the entire league. Right now, they sit at a sterling 17-4 record, which is even more outstanding when you consider that of their 4 losses, 2 of them are in overtime. So it's just they are rolling, Sap. I thought they were going to be good. I didn't think they were going to be this good. And they got some more good news today, Sap, as Rob Williams is practicing with the team again, scrimmaging with the team. Celtics released a little bit of footage of that. He was blocking shots, going up for lobs, looked like the old Rob Williams. So they should have him back. They're hoping for around Christmas, New Year's, and that should make the team even more dangerous than they already have been, Sap.
Right, Jed. I mean, going forward, Rob Williams is a key piece here, especially on the defensive end. If you're playing the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals or the Cleveland Cavaliers in the second round, because those two teams have big guys that are effective. So you need more size up front. Right now, you've got Al Horford, who doesn't play back-to-back games. Luke Cornett's chipped in and been really a major surprise, but you're not going to count on him in the postseason against elite players. So Rob Williams is obviously a key component to this team. Good to see him back. I wouldn't rush him back. And then what I would do going forward once we get to 2023 is when you have back-to-back games, the first night have Horford play, Williams sit. The next night have Williams play, Horford sit. When it's back-to-back, don't have them both play. Give them each a night off so that they can really do a great job with time management. I'll also do that with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown going forward. They did that earlier in the week, and I think it works out well. Back-to-back situations, give Brown a night off, give Tatum a night off. They can get by a lot of these teams with one of those guys sitting out. So you want to start to manage minutes a little bit so that these guys are fresh heading into the second half of the season and into the postseason. But Rob Williams coming back is great news, even if it's another month before he's back on the court.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about, right now the Celtics, they're playing so confident. They look so good. They're scoring just insane amounts of points, Sap. They're averaging over 121 points per game. The next closest team in the Eastern Conference are the New York Knicks, who are averaging about 115. So the Celtics are, lapping the field in terms of how many points per game they're scoring. And as you just mentioned, Sap, they did rest Tatum in one game, Brown the other game. The other day they played against the Wizards and the Hornets, two sort of middling to bad teams in the East, and they handled both of those teams without much difficulty. The Hornets, they just absolutely walloped 140-105, and Jaylen Brown didn't even play in that game. So the Celtics have no problem scoring the basketball whatsoever. And Rob Williams, when he comes back, is going to improve the defense. He can score because he's a lob threat, but really what his key is on this team is his defense. And so the Celtics defense has been good, not great this season. It's been getting a little bit better. And with the addition of Rob Williams, it should improve to closer to where it was at the end of last season, which was elite in the NBA.
Their most recent win over Charlotte, they were up 43-16, 9.5 minutes into the game. They were up 27 points, 9.5 minutes into the game. If you were running late to get to the game, stopped at the concession stand, went to find your seat and sat down and looked up at the scoreboard, it was 43-16, 9.5 minutes into the game. I'll say that for a final time. That means they were outscoring Charlotte on a per minute basis of 5-2. That doesn't even seem real in the NBA. That almost feels like North Carolina or Kentucky playing some, Division II school in college basketball. That's how good they are offensively. Rob Williams will help you defensively. And the other thing, too, is when you look at their three-point shooting, they're leading the league shooting 40% from three. Now, I don't know if that's sustainable for an entire season. Probably not. Again, when you get up big, obviously the likes of, whoever, whether it's Peyton Pritchard or Hauser, they're going to go out and hit multiple threes because there's no pressure. But, if you can be in the 36-37% range in tight competition against the likes of the Bucks, Cleveland, get to the postseason, that should be good enough. They're the best team in basketball right now, Jed. And I think the only team that is even close to them is Milwaukee. And I know we're going to kind of break down what teams could threaten the Celtics in the Eastern Conference. You got to give Milwaukee a lot of credit, too, because they're only 2 games behind the Celtics, and they're doing that without Chris Middleton, who's recovering from off-season wrist surgery. So, the two best teams in the Eastern Conference are playing without pretty key components, and they look like the two best teams in the Eastern Conference, although I still would not fall asleep on Cleveland, who beat the Celtics twice this year, both games in overtime, and I think they could be a matchup problem for both Milwaukee and the Celtics because they have two guards that can break you down defensively, and Darius Garland and, of course, Donovan Mitchell. And they also have two bigs that are really good, and Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And I think that could cause a problem for the Celtics. But when Rob Williams comes back, that can maybe negate one of those guys. So those, to me, are the three best teams in the Eastern Conference. But right now, if you said put $100 on the team that you think is going to win the NBA championship in June, I'd put it on the Boston Celtics right now. And I'm not a green teamer. You are. But you'll criticize them when necessary. But I'm, more agnostic. But I think they're the best team in basketball, handily.
Yeah, what's impressed me the most about them, Sap, is how confident they've been playing in all these games. They feel like they walk out in the court, and in past seasons, they felt like they walked down the court and they felt like they were the best team, and then they didn't try. Now they feel like they're the best team in the court, and they're trying, and so they're really kicking the crap out of some teams. They're scoring with ease. They look like they're having a lot of fun. The ball movement's terrific, and I think, Sap, a large part of that, the credit for that, one goes to Joe Mazzulla, who's given the team, I think, a lot of confidence in their offensive abilities and opened things up for them, how they're doing things offensively. And two, Sap, the bench has just been outstanding. And when your bench, you trust your bench to come in and be able to protect leads and score the basketball, suddenly you don't have to play as many minutes. You don't have to play as tight. That you're not facing as intense a defense. So I think Mazzulla's also done a good job of mixing the bench with some of the starters, Sap. You see Tatum or Brown play with some of the bench players too, and it just makes that all the more dangerous. Malcolm Brogdon has fit in perfectly. They've gotten a lot of good play out of Luke Cornett. Grant Williams has picked up right where he left off last season. Pritchard, when he's come in, has played well. Hauser's been a revelation in terms of how he shot the ball. So we went from a team where we were talking about this, Sap. We've been doing this for a while now, where Danny Ainge assembled a team that had virtually no bench and a roster that didn't really make sense. And Brad Stevens, in just a couple of years of the job, has developed a really deep roster. I mean, this is not just a Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown show. This is a really deep roster. I mean, they go 8-9 deep, Sap.
Yeah, when Rob Williams comes back, you're looking at Williams, Horford, Tatum up front with Brown and Smart as your backcourt. Now, your top three guys off the bench, in some order, will be Malcolm Brogdon, Derek White, and Grant Williams. That's your 8-man rotation going forward into the postseason. And that should be enough to win a championship because you really only have to go 8 deep. But throughout the regular season, it's nice to have competent players at 9, 10, and 11, which you have in Sam Hauser, Peyton Pritchard, and Luke Cornett. Like, once the playoffs come, I don't know how many minutes those three guys are going to play because the schedule opens up where you're not playing back-to-back nights, and obviously the competition gets better. You're playing Cleveland in the second round, Milwaukee in the conference championship, and whoever in the finals. So the competition does get better. But for the regular season, that's so important to have a bench that you can trust because it is important to end up with the best record in the East so that you avoid maybe a tougher second-round matchup. Like, again, I'm looking far ahead here. But
Right.
Let's say the Celtics are the 1 seed, Milwaukee's the 2 seed, Cleveland's the 3 seed. Now you've got the Celtics playing, I don't know, Philadelphia or Atlanta or whoever in the second round. Meanwhile, Milwaukee and Cleveland could have a 7-game series in the second round, and that could kind of soften one of those teams up for the Celtics. It didn't work that way last year because Miami was the number 1 seed, got to the Eastern Conference Finals without really breaking much of a sweat, and the Celtics, who had to beat Milwaukee in 7 games, they were fired up and ready to go for the Eastern Conference Finals where they beat Miami in 7 games. So sometimes that tough second round series can get you stronger rather than weaker going to the next round. But I think it's good to get home court advantage because you didn't have it in the Eastern Conference Finals. You were able to win over Miami last year, but you didn't have it in the NBA Finals, and you lost in 6 games to Golden State. So right now they're set up to be the number 1 seed in the East, have the best record throughout the league. And once you go into the playoffs with that, if you're healthy and you got Rob Williams contributing, you'll be the favorite when we get to April, without question.
Sure. And, I think, as you alluded to earlier, Sap, it seems like the Celtics and the Bucks have definitely separated themselves from the pack at this point in the season right now. Now, there's still a ton of basketball left to be played. Philadelphia is going to get James Harden back pretty soon. Brooklyn is playing a little bit better than they were. They're still not playing great, but they're playing a little bit better. I think a lot of people expect Miami, who the Celtics play tonight, to make a move to bring in a all-star caliber player. So teams should improve, and some other teams I think will die off a little bit and start to really go into that tank mode in this draft. But yeah, Boston and Milwaukee look almost destined to go back at it in the postseason. And as you mentioned, Sap, Milwaukee has played great without any Chris Middleton this year, and Giannis has missed a couple of games, and they've still won a couple of those too. So it's a really good Bucks team. I don't think it's as deep as the Celtics team, and that might be their advantage, is that the Celtics are going to be able to, over the course of the season, perhaps get a little bit more rest and be fresher for the playoffs. And they're a better shooting team than Milwaukee. The Celtics, like you said, maybe it's not sustainable where they're at right now, but it's not going to drop off dramatically from where they are right now. I just don't see that. I think that this is enough of a sample size to say, okay, this is a really reliably shooting Celtics team. They might have some off nights, but it's not going to be, incredibly inconsistent.
I'm going to give a lot of credit to your favorite player on the Celtics. And you know me with Marcus Smart. I will criticize him when I think it's necessary, but I will also compliment him when it's deserved. Right now, Marcus Smart's playing the best he's ever played. We're a quarter of the way through the season. The three numbers I'm looking at that show to me that he is really on point this year is he's averaging 9.3 field goal attempts per game, which to me is perfect. There's no way in the world that Marcus Smart should ever take more than 10 shots per game, because you've got Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and Malcolm Brogdon and a bunch of other guys that can score. He doesn't have to shoot a lot to be effective. He's also averaging a career high 7.5 assists per game, only 2.1 turnovers per game, which is a 3.6 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. I gave you a lot of numbers there. They're all really good, right? So if he just keeps playing at that level, his usual defensive acumen, he's going to be such a key contributor here. And now you've got depth at that position. Obviously, Brogdon is such a versatile player off the bench. And when you're whole, Dirk White also comes off the bench and gives you another point guard. I saw Joe Mazzulla a week ago put out a lineup of all three of the point guards, Brogdon, White, Smart, to go with Tatum and a big. That's an intriguing lineup, right? Because now you've got three really good smaller defenders in Smart, White, and Brogdon. You've got Tatum, who's playing at a very high level defensively. And then you've got a big, whether it's Horford or down the road, it could be Rob Williams. You got to play outstanding defense. And now you've got a bunch of shooters out there too. And Smart's kind of the guy orchestrating all of that. When he's playing like that, he did for a lot of the second half of last season. He didn't keep it up in the postseason. There were games where he almost shot you out of the playoffs. And let's not forget Game 7 against Miami, when they had a 13-point lead with 3 minutes left and nearly blew it. And I think he was one of the biggest reasons why that almost happened. If he stays within himself, and I know it's a cliche in sports, but under 10 shots per game, 3.6 to 4.0 assist to turnover ratio, that's going to make them even tougher. So I want to give a lot of credit to Marcus Smart so far this season.
Well, thank you, Sap. I appreciate that.
Okay.
It's fair. It's big of you to say that. Yeah, I mean, he's coming off a game where he had a career high in assists the other night. I think, Sap, sort of what you were alluding to there, the presence of White and Brogdon has really helped, I think, open up Smart's game, because he feels like, I don't have to do everything as a guard. I have these backup guards that I can rely on, and White's been starting a lot of games too, because the Celtics have gone a little bit smaller with Rob Williams not in the lineup yet. But I think that that's really helped him as well. And Brogdon has, stepped in as he can really on nights be a second or third primary scorer. And so Smart doesn't have to really ever assume that role. And that's for the best, because Smart can focus on his defense and playmaking, both of which he's obviously really, really good at. And Brogdon's offense has enabled Smart to be able to be more focused on point guard duties, if that makes sense, Sam.
Without question, Jet. And again, I'll go back to the Wayback Machine, because I'm the old guy here on the show at nearly 60 years old. Man, I turned 60 in April. That's kind of scary.
You got to do a big celebration for that, though.
I think so. Why not, right? But
get a cameo from Barry Bonds, maybe?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm his only fan, right? Trying to keep the hope alive that he gets into the Hall of Fame. Heck, Harold Baines is in the Hall of Fame, and Scott Rowland's going to make it. Why can't Barry Bonds be in there? But I look at the player that the ceiling for Marcus Smart, and I don't think he's ever going to attain this, is Dennis Johnson. Is in the Hall of Fame. May he rest in peace. Was one of my favorite players. Dennis Johnson, when he was with the Celtics, realized what his role was to maybe take 9, 10 shots per game. He'd get 6, 7 assists, minimal amount of turnovers, and play excellent defense. I mean, Larry Bird has stated on many occasions that the smartest player he's ever played with was Dennis Johnson. That's what you want to see Marcus Smart do. When he starts hoisting up too many threes and tries to get in, it seems like competition with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, then the team goes off the rails a little bit. If he just plays within himself, and again, it's the second time I'm using that cliche, but it does apply, then they're going to be that much tougher. So to me, he isn't the best player on the team. It's obviously Jason Tatum followed by Jaylen Brown, and then you can power rank the rest of them. But he may be the most important because, again, he's got a big personality. If he stays within himself, the team is going to be that much more difficult to beat.
Yeah, and he's the longest tenured guy on the team. I think a lot of people look to him for leadership, even though, Al Horford's older and Tatum's obviously the best player on the team. But Smart is the emotional leader of the team, and he's been here the longest. So I think that gives him a lot of cachet in the locker room. And when he's playing within himself, to use your statement there, Sap, I think that enables it to be a lot easier for other players to look at themselves and say, okay, he's doing it. I'm going to show, follow the example. And so the Celtics have done a great job of that this year, and really very, very little complaints because at the beginning of the season, I thought the defense was dreadful, and it's still not great, but it's gotten a lot better. And they're scoring so many points that you have to, and so quickly that you have to, account for, okay, well, the other team's going to have to score this at this pace. It's a track meet. But no one's going to beat them at this sort of track meet game. It's like the Warriors for years. Like, okay, they're going to give up a lot of points. They're still playing pretty good defense, but they're just scoring so quickly. Inevitably, the other team's going to score, but the Warriors are still going to outscore you by 15, 20 points.
Cross-sport reference, the Kansas City Chiefs will go out and put up 30. They may give up 24. It doesn't mean their defense is terrible. It's just that their offense is so good. Maybe you score a garbage touchdown, make it a little bit closer. The other night, again, I'm going to reference that Charlotte game, and I know Kelly Oubre was the best player on Charlotte that night. So
they
obviously
stink, but
they were terrible, and their best players weren't playing. The Celtics had 121 points after three quarters. I mean, they only scored 19 points in the fourth quarter. They could have scored 160 that night if they really felt like it. So it's tough to judge how their defense is when they're putting up so many points. You're averaging, as you said earlier, 121 points per game. You're not going to lock down teams and hold them to 100. I mean, it's just never heard of in the NBA that you win by 20 points per game. I mean, even the 95-96 Bulls didn't win by that large a margin. So, again, when you score as easily as the Celtics, maybe you give up a little bit on the defensive end. You do have to be prepared to play defense because when you play a team like Milwaukee or Cleveland that can play defense and the game is a lower scoring game, well, now your defense is going to have to step up. Again, they've only lost 4 games this year, 2 in overtime to Cleveland. Twice they lost to the Bulls. The thing that those teams have in common is they have competent bigs. And right now that could be a weakness for the Celtics because they don't have Rob Williams. And if Horford's sitting out because it's a back-to-back, they're kind of a smaller team. Allen and Mobley with Cleveland are outstanding. Vucevic is really good with Chicago. And they also have 2 scorers in DeRozan and Levine, who they're not Tatum and Brown, but they're reasonable facsimiles of. Like if Brown and Tatum go out and score 55, those 2 guys can go out and score 50. So it's almost a wash. So, those are tough matchups for the Celtics. That's why I think it's important to maybe get your feelings on who is the toughest threat against the Celtics in the East. And we both agree it's Milwaukee, right? Because they have the best player. But who else could cause a problem against the Celtics? Maybe in the second round where all of a sudden you're in a 2-2 series against a team that you expect to beat in 5 games, and it's certainly going to go 6 or 7.
Yeah, it's Cleveland, like you mentioned, because the thing the Celtics don't do well is they don't offensive rebound the ball very well at all, which is good because that they make a lot of shots because they have a very low offensive rebound percentage. They're even when Rob Williams comes back, you can't expect him to play 35 minutes a night. It's not sustainable. So they're always going to be a slightly undersized, which they're very comfortable playing that way, but. If you're getting out rebounded badly in the NBA, odds are you're going to lose a game. So if the Cavaliers are just crushing the Celtics on the boards, that could be a problem. You mentioned Chicago, who looks like they're not headed to the playoffs as it is right now. So I'm not too worried about them. You always have to, in the back of your mind, be worried about, a healthy, competent 76ers team because of how good Embiid can be. But the Celtics historically have done a good job against the Sixers. Whether it was the Ben Simmons iteration or not. So really, Milwaukee, Cleveland, but we haven't seen what the Bucks look like at full health, and we haven't seen what the Celtics look like at full health. And so, that's sort of how I'll make my determination there. But yeah, right now, I would I would say, yeah, the teams that are directly below them, Sap, Milwaukee and Cleveland are the two scariest. And then after that, I'd say, the Sixers, and I guess the Nets are always looming because of how talented Kyrie and Durant are. But I don't think the Celtics, or really any team for that matter, fears the Nets anymore.
No, because I think Kevin Durant still wants out of there, and who the hell knows what's going through Kyrie Irving's mind, and if Ben Simmons wants to play. Yeah, I think it's Celtics, Milwaukee, Cleveland. Those are the three best teams in the Eastern Conference. Philly, Harden comes back, Tyrese Maxey comes back. If Embiid can last the season and be somewhat healthy in the postseason, they can always be a tough matchup. But no, I think it's the Celtics, Milwaukee, and Cleveland in the Eastern Conference. And then you have to also see what these teams do at the trade deadline. I think if Cleveland goes out and gets a good 3-and-D guy, that could really make them even that much more difficult to play. They're a weirdly constructed team, Cleveland. You've got Garland and Mitchell, who are both 6'1", like smallish guards, but they can really break you down. Then you have two really good bigs in Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. They don't have much in terms of mid-sized players. And it's kind of strange because the league is built on those mid-sized players, 3-and-D guys. I'm thinking maybe down the road, if they go ahead and acquire, say, Harrison Barnes from Sacramento, who, by the way, is having a horrible year shooting threes. He's at about 24% from beyond the arc, but he's a good player, right? He's won a championship with Golden State, good defender. That type of player, then I think they'll be even that much more difficult. Then also you've got to see how Milwaukee is once Chris Middleton comes back. Maybe by Christmas Day when the Celtics play Milwaukee, Middleton's back for the Bucks. Williams is back for the Celtics, and you'll see both teams at pretty full strength, and that'll be a real telltale game on Christmas Day when the Celtics play the Bucks.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that circle on their calendar. It should be a really good game, as the two teams have played each other really tight over the past couple of years, with the Celtics getting the best of Milwaukee last year. So yeah, that's what it looks like in the East right now, Sap. A couple of surprise teams. The Pacers, 12-8 behind the play of my guy Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah.
The Raptors are right about where we expected. The Wizards playing a little bit above water that we thought. The Hawks right about where we expected. The Knicks hanging into that last play-in spot. But let's switch our attention then to the Western Conference, Sap, and check in there, where I think both you and I are surprised who's at the top of the Western Conference, the Phoenix Suns. If you've been looking the past couple of years at the NBA, you wouldn't be surprised. But with all the drama that went on in the offseason and the way that they exited the postseason last year, I think you and I were both thinking they would kind of crap out and be middle to bottom of the pack in this Western Conference in terms of the teams that make the playoffs. But they've so far just picked right up where they left off the past couple of regular seasons, which is playing really good basketball. They're 11-1 at home, 14-6 on the year.
Yeah, I mean, Monty Williams, I think, is one of the best coaches in this league. Obviously, Chris Paul's a great leader at point guard. Devin Booker's a top 10 player. I think, I was kind of power ranking the best players in the league. I kind of put them in different classes. I've got Giannis, Luka, and Tatum, to me, are the three best players in the league right now. Then I'd go with Curry, Embiid, and the Joker as the next three. The next three after that, to me, are LeBron and Durant. You still have to put them in the top 10 because on any given night, they can still be incredible, but they're older and they're not what they used to be. Devin Booker's in that class as far as being a top 10 player, right? I mean, he just goes out every night and gives you close to 30 points, outstanding defense. He's a clutch player. He's a guy who was first team All NBA last year. Let's not forget that. He was a top 5 MVP vote getter. So he's outstanding. DeAndre Ayton is a talented guy who didn't want to go back to Phoenix, but they matched the offer. He's there. I don't even know if he's talking to Monty Williams, but they're getting things done in the Western Conference. But, Jet, the top 10 teams in the Western Conference are only 4 games apart. Phoenix is 14-6. They have the best record in the Western Conference. Right now, 10th, which would be the last play-in team, is Dallas, led by arguably the best player in the league this year, in Luka Doncic. I mean, he's right there with Tatum and Giannis. They're the 3 leading candidates, right, for MVP. They're 10-10, and they're in 10th place in the West. So there's not much between 1 and 10. And I think you're going to see that a lot throughout the year. I mean, it'll shake up a little bit as we get deeper into the season, but that kind of gives you an idea of where the Western Conference is, because Golden State's kind of underperformed, but they're starting to get their act together. And then you got a team like Sacramento, who hasn't been in the playoffs since, Tom Brady only had 1 Super Bowl on his trophy case, back in 2002. That's the last time they made the playoffs. So they're playing a lot better. Yeah, it's a long time. So the West is really, really up for grabs. And, Memphis is still playing at a high level. I still like Denver to come out of there, especially if they can add a piece at some point. But, yeah, the West is wide open, whereas the East, I think we kind of pick 3 teams that are going to fight it out. with the West, who the hell knows? I mean, Luka got to the conference finals a year ago. He's playing at a high level. If they can add something at the trade deadline, I wouldn't be shocked if they're back into the conference finals. And right now they're 10th in the conference.
Yeah, Sap, I almost feel like in the West, it's going to be a race to see who can be the team that adds that, all-star caliber player, and then they could take the conference, because nobody has really separated themselves and looking like, okay, this team is going to be, at least to the degree that Milwaukee and Boston have in the Eastern Conference. So yes, I like the Nuggets a lot too. The Suns have played better than I thought they were going to, but you can't discount, like you said, Devin Booker. Chris Paul still plays at a high level despite his age. Aiden's a good player. They have other good players, Bridges, and they have a very good coach there too. I wouldn't trust them in the playoffs. They kind of have done what the Utah Jazz used to do, which is look really good in the regular season and peter out in the playoffs. But I could see, of a bunch of these teams, Sap, that are in the mix right now, Dallas, Golden State, Portland, even the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Suns. If one of those teams are able to land a really, really good, high level player, if one of those teams are able to land Kevin Durant, then suddenly you could say, hey, this team might win the whole thing, not just the Western Conference. I've said this, Sap, since the Durant rumors started. I think Denver is the perfect place for him. I think him and Jokic could, just the two of them, is good enough to win a championship. Obviously, it appears Dallas, if they just had any help for Luka, could be a legitimate championship contender because he's playing at that high of a level. And we know what Golden State is capable of. So I think that, as close as the West is, it may very well end up being a race to see who can acquire that big gun to bring in and put them over the top.
Yeah, and the Lakers players are saying they're only 2 players away.
Yes,
I think
true.
The 2 players are Tatum and Giannis, maybe, but maybe
well, they're playing
Miles
a little bit
Turner.
better.
They are playing, but as long as they can play the San Antonio Spurs on a nightly basis, they'll be
it's a good
fine.
schedule they've had.
Yeah,
nice little
great schedule.
The
The San Antonio Lakers series has been taking place the last week. Yeah, the Lakers, if they can add Miles Turner and Buddy Hield, maybe they could be a factor.
I think the Pacers at this point doesn't seem like they want to.
No, I mean, they're the 4th best team in the Eastern Conference. I don't think that's going to keep up for the entire season. But, your guy, Halliburton, is nearly a 20-10 guy, and the 10 being
and they
assists.
That organization doesn't tank for whatever reason. That's like an organizational philosophy. We'll never tank. They just constantly love being in the middle of the pack in the NBA. I mean, we saw this offseason, they wanted to sign DeAndre Ayton. They had to sign, sealed, and delivered, but the Suns matched it. So I don't think they have any intention of just saying, oh yeah, we really want draft picks, we're going to blow it all up. I think the Lakers would have to give them more than just those 2 picks for those guys now. And Russell Westbrook, as we've talked about a million times on the show, is a net negative contract, though I think he's playing pretty well this season. He got bloodied up the other night, but he's not the problem right now.
No, not at all. I think he's playing just fine. It's just that LeBron's in and out of the lineup. He's taking way too many threes. Anthony Davis is playing at a high level. Right now, it's on LeBron. You're the best player. You're the guy who, in my opinion, is the greatest player in the history of the sport. You still have a very high skill level. It's not like he's washed up at all. I would like to see him go to the basket more, take fewer threes than, hoisting up nearly 9 a game, which is just not his game. To me, this would be like having, Tom Brady running RPOs. Like, let's make Tom Brady run the same offense that Josh Allen is, because we want to try to prove something.
No sense.
Makes no sense. I mean, LeBron can hit threes. He can get streaky, but let it be organic. Let's not force it in the first quarter. So I think if he starts to play more the way LeBron could play, the Lakers could sneak in there as a play-in tournament team, a play-in team. And then who knows what happens from that point, because I think he's still playing at a high level, and Anthony Davis is playing at a high level. And
Anthony Davis is playing great. Yeah,
he's playing great. I mean, before the season, I picked him to be MVP of the league. I mean, that was a long shot to be sure, but he's playing at a pretty high level. It's just the team isn't good enough to really be MVP candidate.
Like we talked about, Sep, the structure of the team is bad. LeBron, still very good player, all-star caliber player without a doubt. Anthony Davis having an all-star caliber season. Russell Westbrook, to the shock of everybody, playing his role very, very well and doing a good job doing it. But they have no shooters and they have no wings. So it's not something that's going to be able to work in the NBA. They're giving up a lot of points. Their defense isn't very good, and they're sort of bottom to middle of the pack in terms of scoring because they can really only score around the basket because LeBron's not shooting well. Russell Westbrook's not going to shoot threes. Anthony Davis is a good shooter, but you don't really want him out on the perimeter the whole time. And so they're getting a lot of twos. And in the NBA in 2022, that's not going to, that's going to be hard to win a game when you're just shooting a lot of twos.
Lonnie Walker the fourth becomes your go-to guy on the perimeter. And they had a 17-point lead the other night against Indiana, and they lost. That's a killer game for a team that's struggling to get to 500. You can't lose a game like that. They did. So that's going to obviously cost them in the long run. But, yeah, the Western Conference is wide open, and I think you make a great point, Jet. Like one of these teams, whether it's Dallas or Denver or whoever, goes ahead and makes a big move. It could be Golden State, because Golden State's not afraid to make big moves, and they have a lot of capital to deal in that market. Maybe they add a piece, and they become the favorite in the Western Conference. It's going to be wide open out west. The playoffs are going to be fascinating. I mean, you could see a 7 upset of 2 very easily. You could see an 8 upset of 1. I mean, that doesn't generally happen in the NBA, but that could happen this year, especially if a team like, say, Minnesota gets their act together late and Karl-Anthony Towns comes back from this calf strain that he's going to keep him out for a couple of weeks. Maybe Minnesota gets on a roll and is a dangerous 7 or 8 seed. Who knows? But the West is wide open, whereas the East is. We're almost getting ready for round 2 of the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, with Cleveland playing Milwaukee and the Celtics playing somebody in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm the West, all these teams have to just keep an eye on Kevin Durant and Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And if I'm Phoenix or Denver, neither of which has ever won a championship in their history. Denver's never even been to the finals. I do whatever it takes, short of you're not trading Devin Booker or Nikola Jokic for Kevin Durant, but anybody else, go. Sure. I mean, I think that at this point, Dallas, same thing. If you're not trading, as long as it's not a Luka, whatever Brooklyn wants, you give them, because it is wide open in the West. And the Celtics and the Bucks certainly look like the 2 best teams in the league. But if you add Kevin Durant to a superstar player, you absolutely are on par with them. So I would like to see one of those teams in the West really go for it and say, we're going to not just sit on what we have right now and hope. We're going to acquire a transcendent player and really try to win a title this year. I think that would make a lot of sense. I don't think that Brooklyn is going to be, so stubborn that there's no way they would trade Durant no matter what. So I think that that's something to definitely keep an eye on.
Yeah, without question. I mean, is a case also that Luka or Jokic go into management and say, look, I'm playing at an incredibly high level. The Joker's been the MVP 2 straight years. Luka's playing at an MVP level right now. He may be the best darn player in the league for all we know. Do they go to management and say, I need help? And in the case of Denver, they have some pieces that they can give up to get Kevin Durant. Maybe Jamal Murray is part of it. And now you add Durant to Jokic, where I think Jokic then would potentially lead the league in assists at that point. Yeah. Picture those 2 guys playing together.
I think they're perfect pairing, the 2 of those
without
guys,
question. Yeah. Durant, to me, is the easiest great player to play with.
You've said this for years. You really have.
Plug and play. I think he's so simple to play with because he's not ball dominant. He can score from anywhere on the court. He doesn't have a massive ego in a sense that he needs to take more shots than anyone else. I mean, when he went to Golden State, Steph Curry still took his shots. Klay Thompson still took his shots. It wasn't like they gave up a lot to let Durant do his thing. Durant's very easy to play with. I quite frankly, I don't know of a superstar that's still playing or that's ever played that's that easily plug and play like Kevin Durant. He's just that guy, especially if he's properly motivated in a good place where he's maybe not the leader, because that's not his thing. I don't know what the case would be if, Luka's a great leader or Jokic is a great leader. I don't know. But I think that, the dangerous place for Durant, I still think could be Phoenix, because Ayton wants out, Durant wants out. Maybe that's a match. And then Phoenix becomes obviously a finals contending team. If you got Chris Paul orchestrating an offense with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, oh man, that'd be nasty.
I think it's the same thing with Phoenix. Like I said, you've never won a championship. Go for it. Trade Ayton and Bridges and a couple draft picks. Do it. Don't worry about the future. Worry about the now. Right now, Chris Paul's not going to get any better. Go for it. So yeah, I think Phoenix would be, incredibly tough out if they get Kevin Durant. And same goes for pretty much any team. So I think that is really the name to keep an eye on. I've heard, there's some other names that come up, Terry Rozier from the Hornets, but that doesn't obviously have anywhere near the impact of a Kevin Durant trade. So we'll see what happens. But I do think, like you said, in the West, it's so packed together. A trade like that can really separate you from the pack and make you a legitimate title contender. Whereas the Bucks and the Celtics right now, if they're going to make a move, it would be, something minor to, shore up depth. Neither of those teams have to feel any sort of desperation in terms of what they have to do to get over the top and win the title this year.
Unless the craziest thing happened, and this would obviously piss off Celtics fans, and I would love it. LeBron back to the Cavaliers. It's not going to happen, but it's got about as much chance of Tom Brady going back to the Patriots. It's fun to talk about.
Yeah, and it can't happen this year. It could happen next year. So it would because LeBron, the way he structured his contract and the way that he's been, so that could. I mean, listen, next year would it shock me? No, but I would definitely be surprised. I think he's wants to finish his career in LA and then maybe one more year with the Sun. But yeah, I mean, it certainly wouldn't shock me. But right now for this season, Sep, Boston and Milwaukee have to feel pretty good about where they stand compared to the rest of the league.
Oh, without question, because they're also two teams that if their offense isn't clicking, they play at a high level defensively, or at least they can play at a high level defensively. And they have a good setup there. They're a good program, right? There's not a lot of drama right now in those organizations. The Celtics had some in the offseason.
Good for them for being able to get over it, by the way.
They got over it. Right. And maybe, look, I thought that Ime Udoka did a great job last year. I think he was a breath of fresh air. He was willing to challenge players, but maybe after a year of that, they wanted to move on to someone who's going to just let them play. I mean, we're seeing that with the Boston Bruins,
just
right?
Chew gum and let them play.
That gum, I haven't tried it yet. I'm a big gum chewer myself. I'm more of a, Dead Teen Pure. He's into the PUR gum. I got to maybe try that and see how it is because I like the way he's, snapping the bubbles there on the sideline. But yeah, maybe the coaching change is helping the team, which is kind of interesting because we thought Udoka did a great job last year and they got to the finals. See that with the Bruins. I mean, they've been a competitive team for 5 years with Bruce Cassidy, changed coaches, and they're playing even better than the Celtics, if that makes any sense. I mean, if you hate Boston sports, you got to be jealous right now the way the Celtics and Bruins are playing. But it is only a quarter of the way through the season. A lot of hockey and basketball still left to be played. Yeah,
if you hate Boston sports, you should just focus on what's going on with the Patriots and the Red Sox. Right. That'll make you feel happy enough because it's not a good situation in either of those spots right now. Nope. So, but that's going to do it for us here, Sap, at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks to Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out our social medias for all sorts of updates on the show. And Sap always tweets out great stats and polls and stuff like that. So follow him at JohnSap25. Follow myself at Jet Stryer. You can also find the YouTube version of the show on my YouTube page at youtube.com/Jet Stryer. And we'll be back soon with a new edition of the podcast. Plenty of basketball news every single day. So we will be back with you. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you later. See ya.